When you buy a new house, sometimes, you walk in and there's really just a little cosmetic work to do.
Right, yeah. Throw up a fresh coat of paint.
Exactly. You paint, maybe swap out some incredibly dated cabinet hardware. You just make the space your own. It's a gentle transition. But then there are those other properties, the ones where you step onto the lot and realize the previous owner planted deeply rooted, just aggressively toxic landscaping everywhere.
Oh, yeah. The nightmares.
Right. You have like poison ivy climbing up the brickwork, invasive root systems cracking the foundation, thorns choking the soil.
You can't just prune that back.
No, you can't just paint over it. You have to bring in the heavy machinery, tear it all out by the roots, and essentially scorch the earth before you can even think about laying your own foundation.
Yeah, total reset.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. And before we get into it, I just want to say may your day be deeply blessed, and may the week ahead bring you peace, clarity, and unexpected joy.
What a great way to start.
Thank you. Today, we are looking at what is probably the ultimate historical example of tearing out the toxic landscaping.
We really are. We're looking at a total systemic reboot of an entire civilization.
Yeah.
The materials we're unpacking today for you are excerpts from two incredibly detailed study Bibles, the Holman and the NWA, and we are focusing specifically on Deuteronomy chapter 12.
Which is such a wild chapter.
It really is. And the text here, it captures this profound turning point. The Israelites are transitioning from this chaotic, nomadic existence, wandering in the wilderness, into a permanently settled agricultural land.
But to make that transition, it wasn't just about changing their address.
Right.
The text outlines how they were commanded to radically overhaul their physical geography, completely change their daily meals, and redefine their entire understanding of life and death.
It's a massive cultural shift.
Huge. And the very first directive given, before they could even establish their own identity in the land of Canaan, was a zero-tolerance policy for the existing religious infrastructure.
Yeah, zero tolerance is putting it mildly.
The text is incredibly specific and honestly pretty intense. I mean, it commands the complete and total destruction of all the Canaanite places of worship.
And the study notes in both the Holman and the NWA, they highlight that these weren't just, standard buildings in the center of town.
Right.
These worship sites were strategically located on high mountains, on prominent hills, and the text specifically calls this out under every green leafy tree.
Which sounds so picturesque, but the command is brutal.
Yeah. The Israelites are commanded to smash the sacred stone pillars, literally take axes to the wooden Asherah poles, and burn down the carved images.
Just wipe it out.
Exactly. The stated goal is to completely erase the very names of these gods from the physical landscape.
So from a purely practical ancient world standpoint, I have to wonder, and I'm sure you listening might be wondering too, why go with such an extreme scorched earth policy?
Right. Why not just reuse the stuff?
Exactly. If you are a migrating nation trying to settle a new territory, why not just repurpose those beautifully located hilltop shrines for your own worship?
It makes logistical sense.
It seems like it would save a massive amount of construction time and resources. Just move into the existing infrastructure, Swap the signs out.
Well, the psychology behind the Canaanite religion makes repurposing those sites totally impossible. And the study notes break this down brilliantly.
Okay, how so?
Canaanite worship was inextricably tied to the physical geography and the cycles of nature. So the lush vegetation, those specific green leafy trees you mentioned, they weren't just pretty, shady backdrops for a religious service. They were active physical symbols of the fertility of the local gods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The stone pillars specifically represented the storm god Baal, and the wooden poles represented the fertility goddess Asherah. The location itself was the religion.
Ah, so it's not just a building you can swap the sign out in front of. The physical environment is loaded with a completely different theology.
Exactly.
It reminds me of trying to stick to a strict diet while living in the back room of a bakery.
That is a perfect analogy.
The environment is constantly screaming at you to do the exact opposite of what you promised to do.
Right, the environmental cues are just too strong. And the notes emphasize that taking over these sites would inevitably lead to syncretism.
Syncretism, right.
Because human nature almost always takes the path of least resistance.
So syncretism,
Yeah.
for those listening, we are talking about essentially creating a religious mashup, right? Where the local practices get completely blurred with their own theology.
Yes. Picture an ancient Israelite farmer. He goes up to a local shrine under a lush ancient tree where people have successfully prayed for rain and fertility for centuries.
Okay.
Over time, the lines naturally start to blur. Is he praying to the God who miraculously brought his ancestors out of Egypt, or is he just, hedging his bets?
Right, like tapping into the local agricultural magic just to make sure his barley crops survive the season.
Exactly. So the Israelites had to completely sever those geographical associations to start fresh. The physical environment was too deeply ingrained with contrary meaning to ever be neutral.
You have to completely uproot the poison ivy before you can plant a garden.
Exactly.
That makes the severity of the command make a lot more sense.
Eh.
And because they were strictly forbidden from worshiping everywhere, like the Canaanites did, the logical next step for the nation was figuring out exactly where they should worship.
Right, which is a monumental shift for people who have been wandering in the desert for 4 decades.
It fundamentally changes how they organize their entire society. The text says they must seek the place the Lord your God will choose to put his name there.
And the study notes provide some really fascinating historical context for this exact moment.
Yeah, I love this part.
They point out that up until this directive, the Israelites were essentially doing whatever is right in their own eyes.
Which I always assumed that phrase was ancient code for total anarchy, or like deliberate rebellion.
Yeah, it's a phrase that carries a lot of modern baggage. But in this specific context, the notes from the Holman and NWA clarify it wasn't necessarily a sinful rebellion.
Really?
Yeah, it was simply the chaotic reality of a nomadic lifestyle.
Ah.
When a massive group of people doesn't have a central permanent sanctuary and they are constantly moving across a harsh wilderness, religious practice naturally becomes decentralized.
That makes total sense. It was a temporary survival mode.
Right. Families or small tribes had to manage their own rituals on the fly.
But Deuteronomy 12 is slamming the door on that era.
Firmly.
The text mandates that the tabernacle, the central hub of worship, would eventually be set up in one specific location. And the sources actually trace this historical journey, right?
They do, yeah. The central sanctuary moved from Gilgal to Shechem, then it sat in Shiloh for about 300 years.
Wow.
Before eventually finding its permanent, iconic home in Jerusalem under King Solomon.
It's like moving from a completely decentralized franchise model where every single family runs their own little pop-up operation.
Right, their own little tent.
Yeah, to one massive exclusive flagship store.
A flagship store that holds an absolute monopoly on all major religious activities.
But if we look at the logistics of that,
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the government suddenly forcing an entire nation to bring every tithe, every offering, and every firstborn animal to just one single spot on the map.
It sounds impossible.
It does. If you live 50 miles away, in a world without paved roads or refrigeration, hauling a herd of goats across the country for a religious festival sounds like an impossible bottleneck.
Oh, absolutely.
People would just stop doing it.
It is a massive logistical hurdle.
All right.
And the legislation actually acknowledges how difficult it will be. But the centralization wasn't about making worship convenient.
What was it about?
It was about forcing unity. The danger of a decentralized system in the ancient world is that 12 separate tribes will quickly turn into 12 separate nations.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. By forcing everyone to converge on one single location for their major festivals and offerings, it forged them into one unified covenantal people.
It physically prevented them from splintering off in the regional faction.
Exactly. Developing their own customized, localized versions of the religion, that syncretism we talked about, it reinforced a core theological pillar. There is one God, one altar, and one unified nation.
It is a brilliant unifying strategy for a new nation. But practically, it creates an enormous everyday problem for the average citizen.
It really does.
If the only place you are legally allowed to slaughter an animal as an offering is at that central sanctuary, what happens when you just want to have steak for dinner on a random Tuesday?
Right. What do you do?
In the desert camp, the tabernacle was right in the middle of everyone. You could literally walk out of your tent, hand your animal to the priest, and be home in 10 minutes.
Super convenient.
Right. Now they're spread out across an entire country.
The geography is completely changed, which means the theology of dinner has to change with it.
The theology of dinner. I like that.
It's true. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating legal adjustments in the text. Before this moment, almost all slaughtering of domestic animals had a sacrificial element to it.
Right. It was a sacred act performed before the Lord.
Exactly. But Deuteronomy 12 introduces a crucial legal distinction for daily survival. If the central sanctuary is simply too far away, the people are given explicit permission to slaughter and eat their cows or sheep right inside their own towns.
Completely independent of the priests and the central altar.
Yep, no priests required.
It's the ultimate practical loophole. Let's call it the BBQ exemption.
The BBQ exemption, I love it.
Right. It creates a firm boundary between a highly regulated, sacred religious feast at the flagship store and just grilling burgers in your backyard with your neighbors.
Yes, and the sources point out a really strange but brilliant detail to illustrate this shift. The text says they can eat this local meat just as they would eat a gazelle or a deer.
Which seems like a random comparison, but it's not.
It's incredibly intentional. Gazelles and deer could never be used as sacrifices on the altar.
Because they're wild game.
Right. Only domesticated herd animals like cows, sheep, and goats could be offered to God. So by telling the people to treat your cow like a wild gazelle, the text is effectively desacralizing the everyday meal.
It strips the religious weight off of it.
Exactly. It's giving them permission to say, this isn't a holy event, it's just food.
And because it's just food, there is another massive cultural shift that follows. The text explicitly states that both ritually clean and unclean people are allowed to eat it together.
Which is huge.
That blew my mind. Normally, if you were ritually unclean, maybe you touched a dead animal or had a specific skin condition, you were strictly barred from coming anywhere near sacrificial meat.
You couldn't even be in the same room.
Right. But for the Tuesday night backyard barbecue, everyone is welcome at the table, regardless of their ritual status.
It is a profound liberalization of the ancient dietary laws, designed specifically to accommodate their new settled reality. It separates the sacred from the secular in a way that allows normal community life to function.
But wait, if the entire nation is suddenly given permission to eat their meat at home, and they don't need a priest to do it, the entire economic system of the religious workers just collapsed.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head.
The Levites were the priestly tribe, and the study notes make it very clear that the Levites had no land inheritance of their own.
Not at all.
They didn't get farms or pastures to raise their own crops. They were scattered across the different cities specifically to serve the people, and they relied entirely on the portions of the central offerings to survive.
They needed the people to bring the animals to them.
Right. So if the people stop bringing their everyday animals to the center, the priests are literally going to starve.
And you've identified the exact vulnerability the text is trying to mitigate here. This is why Deuteronomy has to repeatedly and urgently sound the alarm with the phrase, "Do not forsake the Levite." The new freedom of centralized worship meant the Levites were in a highly precarious position. They depended entirely on the community's obedience to actually travel those 50 miles.
Uphill, probably.
Probably. To bring the designated tithes and festival offerings to the central sanctuary, it was an economic system built entirely on mutual trust and religious devotion.
Wow.
The community had to actively remember to support the religious workers, or the entire spiritual infrastructure would just collapse.
So the people get this incredible new freedom. You can eat meat in your hometown, you don't need a priest to facilitate it, and you can invite whoever you want to dinner, clean or unclean.
Sweet deal.
But even with all of that liberalization, there is still one unbreakable sacred rule that carries over into their secular everyday meals: the ultimate prohibition.
The absolute prohibition against consuming blood.
The text is adamant about this. Do not eat the blood. It must be poured out on the ground like water.
No exceptions.
Now, I understand that ancient cultures used blood as a strong metaphor, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Pouring it on the ground like water seems incredibly specific and honestly kind of messy.
Yeah, it does.
If the goal is just to not eat it, why not just command them to cook their meat really, really well? Just establish a law that says no rare steaks allowed, and you achieve the exact same dietary result without pouring anything on the dirt.
That makes logical sense, but it assumes the prohibition is just a culinary rule.
Right.
And it forces us to look past the physical act and into the theology. The study Bibles call this the most eloquent metaphor for life in the entire text.
Eloquent metaphor.
Okay. The absolute equation operating here is that blood equals life. And in this worldview, all life belongs exclusively to the Creator.
So to consume the blood would be an act of supreme hubris.
Yes.
It would be illegally appropriating the life force, taking credit for something that belongs only to God.
Exactly. Think about the imagery of pouring it out on the earth. According to the ancient creation narrative, humanity was formed from the dust of the earth, and to the dust we all eventually return.
Right, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Yes. By taking the blood, the ultimate visible symbol of life, and returning it to the earth, The Israelite is making a profound physical acknowledgement every single time they eat meat.
Wow.
They are essentially saying, I am taking the flesh of this animal to sustain my own body, but the life force itself is sacred, and I return it to the God who gave it.
Pouring it out like water ensures it isn't used in some bizarre side ritual.
Right.
And it ensures it isn't consumed. It is simply humbly given back to the ground.
It transforms everything.
It does. That transforms every single local, mundane meal into a moment of reverence. Even when you're just making dinner for your family on a weeknight, you are forced to stop, interrupt your routine, and physically acknowledge the sanctity of life.
And that deep, meticulous reverence for life is precisely what brings this entire text full circle.
How so?
It is the core reason behind everything we've discussed so far.
Because this reverence stands in terrifying contrast to the culture they were actively replacing.
It's
Which brings us right back to the beginning. Why they had to completely destroy the Canaanite high places, smash the pillars, and burn the Asherah poles.
Toward the end of the chapter, the text issues a severe, almost desperate warning to the Israelites. It tells them, do not be ensnared by curiosity.
Do not even ask the question, how did these nations serve their gods?
Right.
I really wrestled with this part of the text because human nature is so recognizable here.
It really is.
We generally think of curiosity as the ultimate virtue. It's how we learn, how we grow, how we understand our neighbors. To see a text specifically warn against asking questions about local history feels very anti-intellectual.
It can feel that way, yeah.
Is wandering through the proverbial museum of another culture really that dangerous?
Well, in a modern academic vacuum, curiosity is a virtue. But the study notes reveal what was actually waiting at the end of that specific road of curiosity.
It wasn't just a museum exhibit.
No, not at all. We aren't talking about a simple disagreement over theology or varying styles of architecture. Canaanite worship involved what the text calls unimaginable moral abominations.
It gets really dark here.
It does. The absolute culmination of these religious practices was the literal sacrifice of their own sons and daughters in the fire to their gods.
Child sacrifice.
Right.
It's almost impossible to wrap our modern minds around how an entire society could normalize something so horrific.
Yeah.
You don't just wake up one day and decide to do that.
And this is where the study notes provide a chilling psychological insight into why they did it.
What'd I say?
They point out that the human heart is inherently inconstant and fragile. In times of peace and prosperity, it might be easy to follow the rules and maintain a reverence for life.
Sure, when everything's going well.
But what happens in times of extreme calamity? What happens when there is a devastating multi-year drought or a famine that threatens to wipe out your village?
Or a massive invading army massing on the horizon. People panic, rationality goes out the window, and survival instinct takes over.
And the Canaanites believed that the gods were temperamental, angry, and needed to be constantly persuaded or bought off.
Oh, man.
If the situation became desperate enough, they believed that offering the most precious, valuable thing imaginable, a human child, could compel or force the gods to intervene and save the rest of the community.
It was the ultimate tragic transaction.
Yes.
So the danger for the Israelites wasn't just a casual academic curiosity about how the previous tenants lived.
No.
It was the temptation to adopt these horrific, desperate practices when their own lives got incredibly hard.
Right. Imagine the thought process. If our God isn't making it rain this season and our crops are dying, maybe we should try the local magic. It seemed to work for them.
That is the insidious, creeping nature of syncretism.
That's why the curiosity was so lethal. You open the door just a crack during a crisis, and suddenly, driven by sheer terror, you are burning your children to secure a barley harvest.
The command isn't just about avoiding a different religion. It's about building a psychological firewall against the darkest impulses of human desperation.
Beautifully said. Which is why the final command in this section is so absolute. Observe everything that is commanded, do not add to it, and do not take away from it.
Do not try to innovate your way out of a crisis by adopting the toxic survival tactics of the past.
Exactly. By erasing the high places, by centralizing their worship to maintain unity, by separating the sacred from the profane in their daily meals, and by maintaining an absolute daily reverence for life through the prohibition of blood.
They were constructing an entirely new worldview.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've traveled from the scorched earth destruction of ancient mountaintop shrines through the complex logistics of an ancient barbecue, all the way to the profound daily sanctity of life.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, connecting this ancient text to our reality today. We saw how ancient physical geography, the mountains, the green leafy trees, the stone pillars, was heavily loaded with cultural and religious influence,
Right.
prompting a command to completely overhaul it because of how it shaped human behavior. It makes you wonder, what is the geography of our modern lives?
Oh, that's a great question.
We might not have carved stone pillars on hillsides, but we have digital algorithms designed to manipulate our dopamine. We have city layouts designed entirely around consumption rather than community.
Endless social media feeds.
Exactly. Massive shopping centers and feeds that are expertly engineered to capture our attention, our time, and ultimately our devotion.
It really makes you think.
How do these modern spaces subtly shape what we value, what we prioritize, and what we functionally worship completely under our radar?
Yeah.
If you were to do a scorched earth audit of your own environment, what toxic landscaping might you find deeply rooted there?
The landscape always shapes the traveler, whether we realize it or not. The question is whether we are going to intentionally cultivate our environment or just let the invasive roots take over.
It's a question worth asking every single day. Thank you for taking this journey with us, for leaning into the complexity of these ancient texts, and for engaging with these massive ideas. We deeply appreciate you being part of the conversation. God blesses all the listeners. See you next time on The Deep Dive.